Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah Day, and welcome to this Frame Quilting Friday video. I have a cool idea, and I decided to turn this into a two-part video series. Basically, the idea is to make a scarf, but make it in the frame. This is kind of the idea, the concept from in the hoop embroidery, where you stitch something out in the hoop of your embroidery machine, and then you take it off the machine and it's almost completely done. There might be like a little bit of finishing, but the project is almost completely done whenever you get it off the machine. And that's the idea I want to run with today. So basically Dad has helped me. He pieced this Bargello quilt top, and this was with leftover pieces that I had laying around from the Waterfall Bargello workshop. And you can check that out at leahday.com/Bargello. So definitely go check out that workshop if you're curious about piecing a quilt like this or quilting it. The concepts that I shared there were for home sewing machine quilting, but you could absolutely use all of those same concepts for long arm quilting too. So make sure to check out that workshop if you're curious about this style of quilt. So I had all these leftover pieces and I just handed them to Dad and said, hey, piece this up for me and make a cool quilt, and I'm going to quilt it and turn it into two scarves. And I decided to make two because it was so wide. Basically, I have a 24-inch wide quilt here, and I think that would make a very, very big chunky scarf. So I decided to instead quilt it as one big piece, and then I'm going to cut it into two lengths. So in this video, I want to show you how I'm going to quilt it. And I did decide to go on ahead and bisect it. So I stitched some straight lines straight down the middle. And I have two different quilting designs. One is undulation and stippling combined together, and the other one is just undulation all by itself. So I hope you enjoy this video learning how I quilted this Bargello quilt with my long arm. And in the next video, I hope you'll come and check it out. I'm going to show you how to turn this quilt into an in-the-frame scarf. So let's get started quilting together. So I am going to stitch through a little bit more undulation over my scarf. So here we go. This is just a completely random echoing line. Sometimes I bring that line close to the line before it. Sometimes I widen it out. Want to be careful about my speed, that I don't speed up too much. This is such a fluid design. It's really easy to end up going too fast. When I reach that edge, I'm just going to stitch along it and then come back around for another pass. Now, this is definitely a weird project because Dad pieced this for me nice and wide so I could actually create two scarves out of this quilt top. So you can see I have already stitched a straight line right through the middle, and that is basically my line that's guiding the midpoint where one scarf is going to be split from another scarf. So that's not really something that you have to worry about so much on a typical quilt. And if you were making a scarf like this, this is about as wide as you need. This is actually going to be a really, really huge scarf. So I want to play around with mixing a different design with undulation, and I've decided that that design is going to be stippling. I think that's a great design combination. So I'm just stitching down this edge so it's nice and secure, and then I'm going to go into a nice open stippling. I don't want it to be too dense or intense, just a nice little wiggly design here. I think it's going to look great. And I've advanced my quilt through the machine so that way I'm running right on the rail. Basically, my ruler plate right now is hitting the back rail of my machine, and that really works out great. When I run out of space, I'm limited by that, and I don't have to worry about stitching beyond the area I want to stitch. So here we go, a little bit more stippling. I'm aiming to keep this about on a 1/2 inch scale, maybe a little bit wider in some place, maybe a little bit narrower in other places, but generally about the distance, about the width of my thumb is what I'm trying to keep in here. And it's really nice to have something like that, you know, keep your hand handy so that way you can visually just check in on your scale and make sure you're keeping the same consistent distance between those lines of quilting. So there we go. I wiggled a row of stippling all the way back, and now I'm going to wiggle that row with a new row coming on down. So this is how I quilt stippling, no matter whether I'm quilting on a long arm or I'm quilting on a home sewing machine. It doesn't matter. It's always the same. I always quilt it in rows, interlocking those rows together. And it's important to understand just the kind of fundamental base of this design, like where does it start? It starts with something as simple as wiggly U-shapes. This back and forth U-shaped design. Here I'm going to change directions, but you can see it's just that same simple U shape, just like so. And then all you do is just simply add bends and twists to it to make it more interesting. Here I'm going to take that, curl that shape down, creating that nice elongated shape. Now I kind of turned that into a peace sign, two shapes side by side, and then swirl up and go in the other direction. I find it actually easier whenever I am interlocking stippling with itself. That just kind of helps make it more creative. Here I just bounce in and out of those shapes and then come back around, twist, and make a turn. Very, very simple. Now if you wanted to, you could of course switch designs at any point. I just really like this. I've got a good bit of undulation through this scarf, and then now I'm going to have a good bit of stippling through this middle section. I think that's going to make a really nice two-part design. And I have other videos on both of these designs, both stippling and undulation. If you want to watch those, you can definitely get more practice at quilting them both. So now I have a cool idea. I wonder what it would be like to switch back and do some undulation through here, coming from this direction. So I'm actually going to swirl this stippling down, just wiggling my way down to this light pink area, travel stitch over, and I'm going to bring up undulation through that light pink area. There we go. It's just kind of a rolling mountain hill. Kind of think of like a cartoon hill to start with. And then I go inside of that and I intentionally bring some lines closer together. I find the peaks are a great place to add extra space, as are the ends. You can really widen out that end. You can really leave a little gap there in the peak, and that looks great too. So there we go, almost finished. I think that ended up looking awesome. And I love how that broke up the stippling. Whenever you start feeling bored, you're like, oh man, I've stitched a lot of stippling now. I'm starting to feel bored and tired of it. Well, then switch back to a different design. Do some more undulation on the other side. And you can see how I ran this through the color. I used the color of my Bargello here as a guide. And I think that's going to end up looking great. It definitely made it more interesting. And it kept me more focused on the design and enjoying quilting it. So I'm just going to finish up stitching stippling through this background. And here's what it looked like whenever I finished stitching this panel. So I advanced the quilt and I've decided to fill this entire side with undulation, and I'm running it with the color changes of this Bargello quilt. So first step was to kind of just pick a foundation line, and it was this kind of taupe color, this light pink, dusky pink color, and that ended up running through quite a lot more space than I was expecting. But that's okay, because now I can just go in and bring in my undulation design. So again, that's bringing the lines closer together, then occasionally leaving these wide gaps. I like to leave those gaps on the tips especially. I think that looks really good. Something like that. And then you can also mix it up as you quilt the design. Where you went close, you can widen it out. Where you went wide, you can bring the lines close. There's really no right or wrong way of doing it. You can see I've advanced the quilt so it runs right along that line that I've used to bisect the quilt. And that's going to help me guide my lines whenever I turn this into a scarf next. So this is really a lot of fun, and it's using the long arm in a very different way. It's using it more like an embroidery machine, which I think is definitely something fun, definitely something to play with, and to start thinking about what you can make right here in the frame, or in the hoop is what we usually say for machine embroidery. Okay, so I've got one more line to stitch in there. Now I'm going to travel stitch. And I know this doesn't look all that pretty right here on this edge. Don't worry about that. That's going to get completely covered up. That's not going to be finishing up. That's not going to be in the finished scarves at all. So here we go. Bring that line nice and wide. Make it really interesting. I think I'll bring this in close right here. I'm trying to be careful with my scale, especially with undulation. I find that it's easy to start bringing my lines in way too close and shrink that scale up too much. And I really want this to finish nice and soft. And it's going to finish even softer because I'm planning on putting minky fabric on the back. So I'm going to have this beautiful design, this beautiful texture and patchwork on the right side, and then minky all on the back. So that's going to be great. So as you can see, this is really very quick. This is actually even faster than quilting stippling because I'm covering more distance with each line that I quilt. I also don't really have to nest the designs together. You know, I don't have to worry about interlocking them the way I was with stippling. I'm just letting these lines flow, and if there's a wider gap, I'm not worried about it. I'm not going to go back in there and fill that up or anything like that. That's the way undulation works. So here we go. I'm going to stitch on down, and I'll show you what it's like to just stitch a basic foundation and get started from scratch. So let's go all the way down here. And please don't worry about travel stitching when you need to. That's A-okay. Okay, I think I'm going to go with this hot pink color. And I'm just going to make this line up as I go. Nice big sweeping movements. There we go. Come to a rounded point. I haven't tried undulation with sharp points yet. I think that might be an interesting idea. Now I'm going to fill in the inside. I seem to always like to fill in the inside first and then I go to the outside. And you see how I spread that out and then bring it in close, just like so. I really love that. It's just an absolutely gorgeous texture. There we go. I think I'm going to sneak in here for one more line. That looks great. And then I'll wiggle off down here. Travel stitch over. And wiggle in. And I think this is a perfect texture for a Bargello quilt. Those are very tricky quilts to quilt. You know, they have a lot of intricate piecing. But, you know, if you cover over it with a thread that mostly blends in, even if it contrasts sharply like this one does, I think it adds a really gorgeous texture that just accents that piecing really nicely. And here's what it looked like whenever I finished the second side of my scarf. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed learning how to quilt this Bargello quilt with undulation and stippling. I think both of these designs work really well over this intense patchwork style, and I cannot wait to finish these scarves and show you what they're gonna look like. So in the next video, I'm going to cover the frame with a piece of minky, quilt and stitch and sew my scarves all at the same time. So when I take them off the frame, they're gonna be nearly finished. I cannot wait to see if this is gonna work. It's gonna be lots of fun, so make sure to join me for the next video coming out next week. If you'd like to learn more about the long arm frame and machine that I am quilting on, it's the Grace Qnique 15R or 14 Plus. Same machine, just different updated numbers, that's all. You can come and check out my setup at leahday.com/grace. I am a Grace machine dealer, and if you use the coupon code Hello My Quilting Friends, you can get an extra $100 off your order. So come and check that out at leahday.com/grace. Until next time, let's go quilt.